What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a talk show expecting a normal conversation, only to be blindsided by a host who thinks he can say whatever he wants? In just 33 seconds of one particular exchange, Piers Morgan's entire interview would crumble, leading to a walkout that nobody saw coming. Samuel L. Jackson sat down in the guest chair, relaxed and ready to talk about his latest film project. He had done hundreds of interviews before. This was supposed to be simple, just another chat with another host. But from the very first question, something felt wrong. Piers Morgan leaned back in his chair with that familiar smirk on his face, the one that said he thought he was the smartest person in the room. He opened with what seemed like a standard question about Samuel's career, but there was an edge to his voice, a sharpness that suggested this wasn't going to be the friendly conversation Samuel had expected. "So Samuel," Piers began, "you have had quite the career. But let us be honest, do you ever worry that you have been typecast? That you are always playing the same kind of character?" Samuel paused, keeping his composure. He had heard this question before from other interviewers, but the way Piers asked it felt different. It felt personal. It felt like an attack. "I do not think that is accurate," Samuel replied calmly. "I have played a wide range of characters throughout my career, from dramatic roles to action heroes to everything in between. I think if you actually looked at my work, you would see the diversity." Piers laughed, but it was not a genuine laugh. It was dismissive, condescending. "Come on now," Piers said, waving his hand as if brushing away Samuel's response. "You know what I mean. The tough guy, the guy with the gun, the guy who says those memorable lines. It is all very similar, is it not?" Samuel's jaw tightened slightly. Anyone paying close attention could see he was starting to get frustrated, but he kept his voice steady. "No, it is not all similar," Samuel said. "Each character I play has depth, has a story, has motivations. Just because some of them happen to be in action films does not mean they are all the same. That is a lazy way to look at acting." The word lazy hung in the air for a moment. Piers shifted in his seat. He did not like being called lazy, even indirectly. His expression changed. The fake, friendly smile disappeared, replaced by something colder. "Lazy?" Piers repeated, his voice rising slightly. "I think what is lazy is doing the same thing over and over and expecting people to think it is different. But let us move on. Let us talk about something else." Samuel nodded, hoping they were indeed moving on to better territory. But Piers had other plans. "You are known for being very outspoken about certain political issues," Piers continued. "Some might say too outspoken. Do you not think that celebrities like yourself should stay in their lane, stick to acting, and leave the serious discussions to people who actually know what they are talking about?" The studio audience went quiet. Even the crew members looked uncomfortable. This was not the kind of question you ask a guest unless you are trying to start a fight. Samuel stared at Piers for a long moment before responding. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured but firm. "Stay in my lane?" Samuel asked. "What exactly is my lane, Piers? Because last I checked, I am a citizen. I have just as much right to speak about what matters to me as anyone else, including you." Piers leaned forward, clearly enjoying the tension he was creating. "But you are an actor?" Piers said, emphasizing the word as if it was somehow less important than other professions. "You pretend for a living. Why should anyone care about your political opinions?" Samuel took a deep breath. He could feel his patience wearing thin, but he was determined not to give Piers the reaction he was clearly fishing for. "I pretend for a living?" Samuel repeated. "Is that what you think acting is? Just pretending? It is about telling stories, about exploring the human condition, about making people think and feel. And yes, sometimes those stories are political. Sometimes they matter. Just because you do not understand that does not make it less valid." Piers laughed again, that same dismissive sound. "Oh, I understand it perfectly," Piers said. "I understand that actors love to think they are more important than they actually are, that somehow being in movies gives them some special insight into how the world works." Samuel shook his head slowly. He was done trying to have a reasonable conversation with someone who clearly had no interest in being reasonable. "You know what, Piers?" Samuel said. "I came here thinking we were going to have a real conversation, but it is clear you just wanted someone to talk down to, someone you could try to make look small so you could feel big." Piers' face flushed slightly. He was not used to guests pushing back this directly. "I am not trying to make anyone look small," Piers protested. "I am asking tough questions. That is what journalists do." Samuel laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "Journalists?" Samuel said. "Is that what you call yourself? Because from where I am sitting, you are just someone with a microphone who likes the sound of his own voice." The tension in the studio was now thick enough to cut with a knife. Piers was visibly angry, his face getting redder by the second. But he tried to maintain his composure, tried to stay in control of his own show. "I think you are being very disrespectful," Piers said, his voice tight. "I have been doing this for many years. I have interviewed some of the biggest names in the world. I do not need someone like you coming on my show and insulting me." Samuel raised his eyebrows at that. "Someone like me?" Samuel repeated. "What does that mean exactly, Piers? Someone like me?" Piers realized his mistake immediately. He tried to backtrack. I meant an actor," he stammered. "I meant someone from the entertainment industry." But Samuel was not buying it. Neither was anyone else in the studio. The phrase, "someone like you," carried weight, and everyone knew it. "Right," Samuel said slowly. "An actor. Sure, that is what you meant." Piers tried to regain control of the interview. He shuffled his papers and attempted to change the subject once again. "Let us talk about your new film," Piers said, his voice strained. "It is another action movie, correct? Another one where you play the hero who saves the day?" Samuel sighed. Even when trying to move on, Piers could not help but take another shot. "It is a film about a man trying to protect his family," Samuel explained. "About sacrifice and love and doing what is right even when it is difficult. But I guess you would just see it as another action movie." Piers rolled his eyes. And that was a mistake. The cameras caught it clearly. The audience saw it. And Samuel definitely saw it. "Did you just roll your eyes at me?" Samuel asked, his voice getting harder. Piers tried to play it off. No, I was just adjusting my position," Piers said unconvincingly. "Do not lie to me," Samuel said. "I saw what you did. You think this is funny? You think disrespecting your guests is entertaining?" Piers' mask finally slipped completely. The pretense of being a professional interviewer disappeared, replaced by raw arrogance. "Disrespecting?" Piers said, his voice loud now. "You come on my show, you insult my questions, you accuse me of all sorts of things, and I'm the one being disrespectful? This is my show, my name is on it, you are just a guest." Samuel stood up slowly from his chair. The entire studio seemed to hold its breath. "Just a guest," Samuel repeated quietly. "You are right about that. I am just a guest, and guests can leave." Piers's eyes widened. He realized he had pushed too far, but his pride would not let him back down. "If you cannot handle a tough interview, then maybe you should leave," Piers said, trying to sound defiant but coming across as desperate. Samuel unclipped his microphone from his shirt. "A tough interview?" Samuel said. "This was not a tough interview, Piers. This was you trying to boost your own ego by tearing someone else down. There is a difference." Piers scrambled, suddenly aware that this was spiraling out of his control. Wait, we can continue," Piers said, but there was panic in his voice now. "We have more to discuss. Let us keep going." Samuel placed his microphone on the chair where he had been sitting. "No," Samuel said simply. "We are done here. I came here to talk about my work, to have a conversation. But you do not want a conversation. You want a punching bag. And I am not interested in playing that role." Piers stood up as well, trying to assert some kind of authority. "You cannot just walk off my show," Piers said. "That is incredibly unprofessional." Samuel looked at him with something between pity and contempt. "Unprofessional?" Samuel said. "You want to talk about professionalism? You have been condescending, dismissive, and borderline offensive since the moment I sat down, and now you want to lecture me about professionalism?" The audience was completely silent. Some of them looked shocked. Others looked like they agreed with Samuel. Nobody seemed to be on Piers' side. "I have treated you with the same level of respect I treat all my guests," Piers insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then I feel sorry for your guests," Samuel shot back. "Because if this is how you treat people, I am surprised anyone agrees to come on this show at all." Piers was grasping at straws now, trying anything to prevent what was clearly about to happen. "Your publicist is not going to be happy about this," Piers said. "Walking off a major interview? That is going to look terrible." Samuel smiled, but it was not a warm smile. "My publicist will understand," Samuel said, "because unlike you, the people I work with actually respect me. They know I do not have to sit here and take this kind of treatment from someone who thinks being on television makes him better than everyone else." That last comment hit Piers hard. His face went from red to almost purple. "I do not think I am better than everyone," Piers said, his voice shaking with anger. "But I do know that I have built a career on asking the questions that need to be asked. on not just lobbing softball questions at celebrities who think they can control every interview. Samuel shook his head. There is a difference between asking tough questions and being deliberately provocative for ratings, Samuel said. You are not some crusading journalist, Piers. You are a talk show host who insults people to get attention, and I am done giving you any more of mine. Piers made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. If you walk out that door, you are never welcome back on this show, Piers declared, as if that was some kind of threat. Samuel laughed, a genuine laugh this time. Oh no, Samuel said with heavy sarcasm. What will I do without the opportunity to be insulted on your show again? How will I ever recover from that loss? The sarcasm was so thick that even some of the crew members had to suppress smiles. Piers realized how ridiculous his threat sounded, which only made him angrier. You think you are so clever, Piers said. You think you are better than this show. But let me tell you something, Samuel. You need shows like this. You need people like me to promote your movies. Without us, you are nothing. That was the final straw. Samuel had been willing to just walk away quietly, but Piers had to take one more shot, had to try to get the last word in. Samuel turned back to face Piers directly, looking him straight in the eye. I need you, Samuel said, his voice low and intense. I have had a successful career for decades. I have worked with some of the best directors, actors, and writers in the business. I have been part of films that people love and remember, and I did all of that without needing validation from someone like you. Piers opened his mouth to respond, but Samuel was not finished. You think this show is important? Samuel continued. You think people care about what you have to say? Let me tell you something, Piers. People watch your show to see your guests, not to see you. And the reason you have to be so confrontational, so rude, so desperate for attention is because deep down you know that. You know that without people like me sitting in that chair, nobody would care about you at all. The silence that followed was deafening. Piers stood there, mouth open, completely at a loss for words. For once in his life, he had nothing to say. Samuel picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. Thank you for your time, Samuel said, his voice dripping with irony. I hope you got the ratings you were looking for. And with that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the set. He did not storm off dramatically. He did not slam anything or yell. He simply walked away with his head held high, leaving Piers Morgan standing alone on his own stage, looking smaller than anyone had ever seen him before. Piers tried to recover, turning to the cameras with a forced smile. Well, Piers said, his voice shaky, that was certainly unexpected. I suppose some people just cannot handle honest questions. But nobody was buying it. The audience sat in uncomfortable silence. The crew looked embarrassed for him. And somewhere, the producers were probably panicking about what to do with the rest of the show. Piers tried to continue, to move on as if nothing had happened. We will take a quick break, Piers announced. And when we come back, we will have our next guest. But the damage was done. In trying to make himself look important by belittling his guest, Piers had instead exposed himself as exactly what Samuel had accused him of being, someone who used his platform not to have genuine conversations, but to feed his own ego at the expense of others. As the show cut to commercial, Piers sat down heavily in his chair. The confidence he had shown at the start of the interview was completely gone. In its place was the realization that he had badly miscalculated. He had thought he could push and prod and insult Samuel L. Jackson the way he did with other guests. But Samuel was not like other guests. Samuel had the courage to stand up and walk away, and that made all the difference. The next guest who had been scheduled was told about what happened. They quietly decided they no longer wanted to appear on the show that day. Then another guest canceled. And another. Word spread quickly about what had gone down, about how Piers had treated Samuel, and suddenly, nobody wanted to be associated with that kind of behavior. Back on the set, Piers sat alone during the commercial break, forced to confront the consequences of his actions. The crew avoided making eye contact with him. The producers were having urgent conversations in hushed tones, and the audience, when the cameras were not rolling, buzzed with conversation about what they had just witnessed. Some of them pulled out their phones, already typing messages to friends and family about the incredible moment they had just seen live, about how Samuel L. Jackson had stood up to a bully and walked away rather than participate in a circus. When the show came back from commercial, Piers tried his best to continue as normal, but his heart was not in it anymore. His voice lacked its usual pompous confidence. He stumbled over his words. He kept glancing at the empty chair where Samuel had been sitting, as if he could not quite believe what had happened. He brought out a comedian who had agreed to fill some time, but the energy was all wrong. The comedian tried to make jokes, but the audience was still processing what they had seen. Laughter came in weak, scattered bursts. The whole thing felt awkward and forced. Piers tried to pretend everything was fine, but everyone could see through it. The Emperor had no clothes, and Samuel L. Jackson had been the one brave enough to point it out. As the show wound down, Piers gave his closing remarks. He tried to end on a strong note, tried to project confidence and control, but his words rang hollow. Everyone who had watched the interview knew the truth. They had seen behind the curtain. They had seen what happened when someone refused to play along with Piers Morgan's game, and they had seen who came out looking better in that situation. It was not the host with his name on the show. It was the guest who had the dignity to walk away. Samuel L. Jackson, meanwhile, left the studio building and got into his car. He did not give any statements to the press waiting outside. He did not tweet about what happened or try to spin the narrative. He did not need to. His actions had spoken louder than any words could. He had shown that there are some things more important than publicity, some things more valuable than appearing on a television show. Things like self-respect, like dignity, like refusing to be treated poorly just because someone has a camera pointed at them. The interview that was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance had become something much more significant. It had become a moment where someone in power, someone with a platform, was held accountable for how they treated people, where the usual dynamic of host versus guest was flipped on its head. Piers Morgan had made a crucial mistake. He had assumed that Samuel L. Jackson needed him more than he needed Samuel, that the actor would sit there and take whatever Piers dished out, because that is what guests do on talk shows. They smile and laugh and pretend to enjoy even the most insulting questions because they have a movie to promote or a book to sell. But Samuel did not need Piers Morgan. He did not need that show. He had options. He had other platforms. He had a career and a reputation that existed completely independent of one hostile interview with one arrogant host. And when faced with the choice between maintaining his dignity and playing along with someone who clearly did not respect him, Samuel chose dignity every single time. That is what made the moment so powerful. It was not about anger or losing his temper. Samuel never yelled. He never cursed. He never did anything that could be used against him later. He simply stated his case calmly and clearly, and then he left. That restraint, that composure in the face of such disrespect, made his walkout even more impactful. Piers had tried to paint Samuel as the unreasonable one, as someone who could not handle tough questions, but anyone watching could see that was not true. The questions were not tough. They were insulting. There is a difference between challenging someone and belittling them. Piers had crossed that line repeatedly throughout the interview. He had questioned Samuel's talent. He had dismissed his career. He had suggested actors should not have opinions. He had rolled his eyes at sincere answers. And when called out on all of it, instead of apologizing or adjusting his approach, Piers had doubled down. He had gotten defensive and hostile. That was his downfall. Not Samuel's walkout, but Piers' own behavior leading up to it. The walkout was just the natural consequence of a host who valued his own ego more than his relationship with his guests. In the end, the interview served as a reminder of something important. That respect is not something that can be demanded. It has to be earned. And once lost, it is very difficult to get back. Piers Morgan learned that lesson the hard way, in front of cameras, in front of an audience, in front of the world. He had been given the opportunity to interview one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. Someone with decades of experience and countless memorable performances. Someone who had stories to tell and insights to share. And Piers had squandered that opportunity by trying to score cheap points and make himself look clever. Instead, he had made himself look petty, small, insecure. All the things he had accused Samuel of being, Piers had revealed about himself. It was a masterclass in projection, and Samuel had held up the mirror. The most remarkable thing about the entire situation was how unnecessary it all was. If Piers had just conducted a normal, respectful interview, everything would have been fine. Samuel would have talked about his movie. They would have had some laughs. The audience would have been entertained. Everyone would have gone home happy. But Piers could not help himself. He had to push, had to prod, had to try to create drama where none existed. And in doing so, he created drama that he could not control. Drama that ended with him standing alone on his own stage, watching his guest walk away. It was a moment that would define Piers Morgan's career in ways he never intended, not as the fearless interviewer asking tough questions, but as the cautionary tale of what happens when you mistake arrogance for confidence. When you confuse being provocative with being interesting, when you think that having a platform gives you the right to disrespect the people who agree to be on it, Samuel L. Jackson walked away from that interview with his reputation intact, enhanced even. He had shown grace under pressure, strength in the face of disrespect, the wisdom to know when a situation was not worth his time or energy. Those are the qualities people admire. Those are the qualities that last. Piers Morgan, on the other hand, walked away from that interview with his credibility damaged, his judgment questioned, his character revealed, all because he thought he could bully someone into submission on his own show. All because he valued confrontation over conversation. The interview became a teaching moment, though not the one Piers had intended. It taught viewers that it is okay to walk away from situations that do not serve you, that you do not have to accept poor treatment just because someone else thinks they have power over you. That dignity and self-respect are worth more than any amount of publicity or exposure. It also taught aspiring interviewers what not to do, how not to treat guests, how not to conduct yourself when you have been given the privilege of someone's time and attention. Piers had been given a gift, the chance to talk with Samuel L. Jackson, and he had thrown it away with both hands. The whole thing was a study in contrasts. Samuel's calm versus Piers' agitation. Samuel's thoughtful responses versus Piers' cheap shots. Samuel's willingness to engage honestly versus Piers' need to dominate. And ultimately, Samuel's decision to leave versus Piers' desperate attempt to keep him there. One man knew his worth. The other was trying to prove his. And that made all the difference in how the interview played out and how it would be remembered. Not as the day Piers Morgan asked tough questions, and Samuel L. Jackson could not handle it, but as the day Samuel L. Jackson reminded everyone that respect is a two-way street, and some roads are not worth traveling down.